900 people froze to death in one single night. And he spent that same night eating hot pot in a heated cave. Everyone thought the permafrost tundra was a death sentence. This is Lenin's story. He landed in the single deadliest zone on the entire planet. Then he awakened a power nobody else in the world had. Then he turned a frozen wasteland into his own private vacation resort. It started with an advanced civilization sealing away every resource on Blue Star. Every pioneer's fate was now tied directly to their home nation's survival. Die in the wild, and your entire country pays the price in disaster. Lenin's body temperature had dropped to 30.2 degrees. Severe hypothermia. Hydration at 3%. Total shock imminent. While other pioneers landed on tropical islands, picking fruit and catching fish on day one, Lenin landed in an S-class forbidden zone, the coldest, deadliest ground on the whole planet. His only harvest after days of struggle was a few pieces of black moss, hard as rock. The system rated it trash tier. The leaderboard mocked him mercilessly for it. His nation's ranking plummeted to 8th place, a penalty followed. The cold wave back home grew worse. Comment sections tore him apart. Coward. Weakling, just excuses. He read every insult in silence. His eyes grew heavy. Consciousness began to blur. This felt like the end. Then a crisp electronic chime rang out inside his mind, sharp enough to snap his eyes back open. Congratulations. Unique hidden talent awakened. The daily intelligence system. Golden text floated directly onto his retina, moving with the shift of his eyes. Survival intel. 80 meters outside the snow cave, a resource crate left by a previous survivor. A golden arrow appeared out of thin air, pointing the way through the blizzard. Staying in the cave meant certain death. Lenin gripped his shovel and crawled out into the storm. Ice shards cut his face like blades. He clawed through 80 meters of pure hell on manic desperation alone. The arrow stopped moving. This was the spot. He raised his shovel and slammed it down with everything he had. The fourth day of the permafrost era became known as the Grim Reaper's Harvest Day. Out of 889 active pioneers, the mortality rate hit 90% overnight. Nobody expected Lenin to survive. His own parents were too afraid to even check his stream. Then the camera cut to his snow cave, and the world froze in shock. He was alive, jacket off, sweating, gnawing on strange meat covered in silver patterns. Metal had struck metal beneath the ice, a crate, oil-soaked tinder, flint, 3 black rocks, and dried meat. The moment flame touched the black coal, ghostly blue light flared instantly, no preheating needed. Terrifying heat radiated outward, forcing back the bone-chilling wind in seconds flat. The jerky melted on his tongue like concentrated energy, not just protein, and his frostbite began healing. Back home, Special Operations Bureau agents delivered emergency rations to his stunned, disbelieving parents. The nation would never let its heroes bleed on the front lines while their families froze at home. Meanwhile, in the Great Hall of Intelligence, analysts watched every other nation's pioneers pull ahead effortlessly. Then a report surfaced. Coordinates in the permafrost zone. Someone had actually stepped outside their shelter. The room went dead silent. That zone had a 95% mortality rate. On the main screen, Lenin pushed forward through the blizzard, alloy shovel strapped to his back. The next morning brought another death toll. Nearly 900 souls gone in a single night. Lenin's intelligence system refreshed again, for golden options appeared. Supplies, environment, crisis, truth. He chose environment, and a holographic map exploded into view, marking a Class A blizzard arriving in 71 hours. His current shelter could not withstand it. Certain death was coming. But one marker flashed. Open water. Fish. He charged out into the storm toward a frozen lake, gripping his shovel like the last weapon on Earth. Viewers mocked him instantly, trying to dig through permafrost with a shovel. Just go back and wait for death. His satiety plummeted. His body temperature dropped drastically. His arms went completely numb. He refused to stop. Stopping meant his sweat would freeze. And that was a one-way ticket to the grave. With a furious roar, he broke through. Dark lake water erupted upward, splashing his face. And he laughed like a maniac. The ice hole was open. Oxygen rushed in. Natural bait. Within minutes, shadows surfaced beneath the water. His shovel became a fishing net, scooping iron-scaled fish onto the ice one after another. Then his satiety crashed to 5%. Dizziness hit. Vision blackened. If he didn't eat now, he would die right there. He tore into his last piece of jerky, and the stream erupted. That meat was glowing. Silver tier food. Strength surged back into his body. He kept fishing, kept catching, kept banking one impossible win after another. Then something massive flashed beneath the black water, twice the size of anything he'd caught. He struck instantly, flinging a translucent, jade-like fish onto the ice. But it wasn't done fighting. It coiled and sprang, bouncing straight back toward the escape hole, and Linen lunged, smashing it flat. Tier 1 ice silver pierfish, rare, substantially increases cold resistance. The chat lost its mind completely. The same troll who'd mocked him earlier went suspiciously quiet, and the entire nation's viewers held their heads high. Back home, his father slammed his thigh with pride while his mother wiped away tears of pure relief. His blind little sister hugged her doll tight, whispering for her brother to come home safely. Greed was the ultimate sin in survival. So Linen packed up while he still could, and fought his way back to shelter. High-energy coal reignited, and the cramped snow cave warmed instantly. He had survived another impossible day. He gutted the ice-silver pearlfish to roast it, and the corpse suddenly sprang back to life, lunging for his face. He backhanded it with the shovel, severing its head clean before the mouthful of razor teeth could reach him. The roasted meat tasted like a bamboo forest after rain, and a surge of heat exploded through his entire body. Satiety cap skyrocketed to 160. A permanent buff unlocked, beginner cold resistance, substantially upgraded. The once bone-chilling wind now felt refreshing. This was what a rare tier food was truly capable of. Meanwhile, a conspiracy against his family had been quietly brewing. His own second uncle plotting to steal his pension. Days later, that same uncle knelt outside Linen's door, begging for a single sprouted potato. Utterly humiliated, Linen pressed his hand to a rare specimen, and the system calculated a stunning 10,000-fold national reward multiplier. His name rocketed from the very bottom of the leaderboard, straight into the top 100 overnight. A legendary tier survival blind box appeared as a bonus. 3 choices: common, rare, legend. He chose legend without hesitation. The bigger the waves, the more expensive the fish. He deployed it 3 kilometers out and prepared to move. Back at intelligence headquarters, the chief watched his overall national fortune leaderboard spike violently upward. This unlucky kid from the frozen tundra had just triggered the rarest resource critical hit anyone had seen all season. At home, his family finally enjoyed their first real feast in weeks, courtesy of state-issued pension supplies. Neighbors who once mocked them now watched with naked envy as delivery trucks arrived again and again. The next morning, another 1,285 people had frozen to death across the tundra overnight. Linen's intelligence system pointed him toward the blind box, buried to 0.8 kilometers away. He packed his gear, started his stream, and walked straight into the raging blizzard once more. Foreign viewers mocked him mercilessly for hunting an airdrop on foot in sub-zero conditions, calling it suicide. 2 hours later, he uncovered a metallic chest glowing with pristine gold light, radiating pure sci-fi energy. Inside sat neatly folded titanium alloy components, a portable Arctic snowmobile, legendary grade. He assembled it in seconds, planted his feet on the pedals, and shot forward like an arrow released from a bow. The chat that had been calling him a dead man went completely, utterly silent, then exploded into chaos. A journey that should have taken hours on foot took him 30 minutes flat, on his new legendary ride. Elsewhere on the tundra, elite special forces soldiers spent entire days trapping just 3 tiny shrimp. Linen, riding his snowmobile toward yesterday's fishing hole, found massive plum blossom paw prints in the snow. A frost demon bear had visited, drawn by the scent of fish. This place was a forbidden zone for humans, but it was an all-you-can-eat buffet for demonic beasts, and Linen decided the risk was worth the reward. He chopped his own caught fish into bloody bait, sacrificing food for a bigger prize. Defying all conventional logic, a school of glowing silverfish surged toward the bait like an underwater storm of pure fluorescent light. 7 treasures piled onto the ice, each worth a fortune. Right before a Class A blizzard warning flashed red, he loaded 40 pounds of fish onto his snowmobile and tore away just moments before the storm hit. At the Intelligence Bureau, an analyst discovered Linen had climbed to 2nd place in the entire region's rankings, while other seeded contestants floundered. An ordinary unranked pioneer sat comfortably atop the leaderboard. Back home, his parents watched in disbelief as another shipment of jade-white strange fish arrived at their door. His mother wept, touching the ice-cold fish, imagining her son suffering alone in that frozen hell. His father resolved to share their fortune with neighbors who had helped them, but never with the cruel second uncle. Deep in the wild, Linen tracked a massive underground nest and locked eyes on his next target, a giant snow rat. This wasn't a grim reaper waiting to kill him. It was walking premium pork belly, and he intended to claim it. That night, something massive crunched through snow just 3 meters from his cave entrance, and his blood ran cold. He smothered his fire, held his breath, gripped his shovel, and waited in absolute darkness for the threat to pass. The footsteps paused, then turned away toward where he dumped animal entrails the day before. He'd been spared. The next morning brought word of nearly 4,000 deaths overnight. The mortality rate was rising, not falling. His intelligence system activated a new view, revealing a ghastly green trail lingering right outside his cave. Tier 1 Frost Dire Wolf. Target marked. He had been hunted, tracked, and locked onto by something far more cunning than a normal wolf. A warning flashed. His shelter could not survive the coming white disaster. A beast waited ahead. Disaster closed in behind. Then a new signal appeared, larger than anything he'd tracked before. A prey worth an enormous gamble. He packed his silver star grilled fish, mounted his snowmobile, and plunged straight into the raging blizzard once more. A faint pale yellow trail led half a meter down into the permafrost, marking a Tier 1 ancient giant snow rat. Deep hibernation, escaping the coming freeze. Red meat and fat were king for surviving the killing cold ahead. He cracked open the frozen earth and found a monstrous white creature curled tight, muscles corded like steel cable. Viewers screamed warnings. That bite force could snap tendons. Even frost demon wolves avoided this creature. Lennon raised his shovel with both hands, timed the strike to the split second before it fully woke, and swung. One devastating blow. The giant rat went still instantly. 20 pounds of pure fat and meat, his for the taking. He found glowing blueberries nearby too, tossed everything onto his cargo bed, and pressed forward with growing resolve. At headquarters, the chief watched Lennon's flawless hunting and openly wondered if this was more than mere luck. Perhaps a sixth sense, an environmental awareness far beyond ordinary human perception. A natural-born hunter. The chief upgraded Lennon's clearance instantly, ordered his family placed under core capital protection immediately. A profit evaluation protocol was initiated, the highest tier contingency plan the nation possessed, reserved for the rarest talents. Lennon, meanwhile, had no idea any of this was happening. Focused entirely on surviving the wind screaming across the ice. He passed dozens of resource hotspots without stopping, every instinct screaming to dig, every fiber refusing to slow down. A countdown ticked on his retina, time until the white disaster. If he lost his life, what use was any wealth at all? Nightfall came hard. He had nothing to upload that day. Left with no choice, he dug a hasty snow cave and curled inside. Back home, a military officer arrived at his family's door in the dead of night, offering something extraordinary. Capital Special District Medical Resources, capable of curing his blind little sister's eyes completely. His father's doubts shattered instantly. An armored convoy sped his family away under the shocked eyes of jealous neighbors. The next morning brought word of another 1,086 deaths, and Lennon crawled from the snow into a stark white void. His intelligence system unfolded a holographic map to shelters lit up, a safe, nearby bare cave with nothing inside, or a warm, distant karst cave, 15 kilometers through open wasteland, promising a constant temperature and its own water source. Short-term comfort would never pave a long-term path. He whipped his handlebars around and charged straight into the storm. Millions watched in horror as the gale turned into a roaring beast, his snowmobile crawling like it was stuck in quicksand. An analyst back home stared at the screen, cold sweat pouring down her face, certain this was an impossible task. A warning flashed. 5 hours until the extreme blizzard fully erupted. Current temperature, -50 degrees. His legs turned to lead, his vision blurred with frost. Every viewer watching believed this was finally the end. Then he let go of the handlebars, pulled out his last silver star grilled fish, and devoured it in desperate bites. One wasn't enough. He ate a second, then a third. The jet exploded, calling him insane, calling him already dead. A volcanic surge of heat exploded through his body. His pale skin flushed bright red. Blue smoke rose from his flesh. Genetic lock unlocked, new ability acquired. Ultimate cold resistance. He roared at the sky, fire burning in his eyes. The snowmobile beneath him let out a beastly roar of its own, speed skyrocketing, tearing through certain death. Behind him, a wall of frost hundreds of meters tall swept across the land like a tsunami. The literal Grim Reaper made real. An analyst back home turned pale as a sheet. Survival rate, 0%. This wasn't a class disaster now. Then the chief slammed his hand on the desk. He has a chance. Ultimate cold resistance. He can make it. Lennon locked eyes on a crevice glowing faintly orange with geothermal heat, his only way out of certain annihilation. He twisted the handlebars violently, shot into the crevice like a silver streak, and crashed through to safety. He crawled out from under the overturned snowmobile, gasping, battered alive. 3 trump cards had saved his life. The blizzard slammed into the boulder outside a heartbeat later, freezing solid against the cave's own radiant heat. Countless frost serpents of ice tried to slither in, only to melt against fire before freezing into a wall of solid ice. Foreign trolls who mocked the storm as trivial went silent instantly. terrified by the raw power of nature unleashed. Once the danger passed, Lennon surveyed his new home, a massive 500 square meter cavern, ceiling 10 meters high. Glowing blue thermal moss lit the walls naturally. Flowing water trickled from a crevice, an endless lifeline underground. Current temperature, 6 degrees, comfortable and stable. While outside the toxic gas zone screamed at -20. This was an S-class shelter by system rating, and Lennon now owned a genuine impenetrable fortress in the deadliest zone on Earth. He spent hours clearing rubble, smoothing the ground, turning his fortress into something resembling an actual home. Foreign viewers seethed with envy watching him do interior design, while their own champions fought prairie dogs for water. Back home, researchers rated his water source Earth tier, inexhaustible, his heat source secret tier, off the charts. Overall shelter rating, 10th globally. An unprecedented achievement inside the single deadliest zone on the entire planet. The hall erupted in celebration, though one sharp analyst noted a cold truth. A fortress meant nothing without resources. Trapped underground with limited supplies, even the best shelter could become a cage where a man slowly starved to death. Lennon, unaware of the debate, moved through his cavern like a mountain goat, checking every corner for hidden danger. Deep in the recesses, he found something both a threat and a treasure. Tens of thousands of hibernating shadow weaver bats. Bat guano for explosives, bat meat for food, bat pelts for gear. But he had no proper weapon to safely harvest it yet. He retreated, filing the discovery away, feeling the agony of sitting on a gold mine while completely unable to touch it. The next morning brought word of nearly 5,000 deaths overnight. His own ranking had slipped without fresh uploads. His intelligence system refreshed again, this time revealing a full cross-section of the underground world beneath him. 2.5 kilometers down, an inverted purple pyramid pulsed on the map. Civilization ruins. The Snow Wind Temple. System prompt. Highly recommended to proceed. Potential to acquire supernatural abilities. His pupils dilated instantly. Every top-ranked survivor in the world held some kind of hidden trump card. This was his chance to finally earn one. High risk, high reward, and the system itself was practically begging him to go. This felt like a gift from heaven. But first, before descending into the unknown depths, Lennon decided it was time for a proper feast to fuel the journey ahead. He hauled out his 20-pound giant snow wrap, thick fat and pink lean meat practically screaming with flavor. He built a makeshift stove, heated a flat stone slab, and laid strips of meat down to sizzle in their own golden grease. The aroma exploded across his live stream, and viewers worldwide practically groaned through their screens in shared hunger. He crushed frostberries into a tart purple dipping sauce, combining scalding meat with icy fruit acid in one perfect bite. The flavor exploded on his tongue, crispy outside, tender inside, and he let out a long, deeply satisfied sigh of contentment. Viewers accused him of destroying their sanity, calling his wilderness survival stream a wilderness vacation instead. At the Intelligence Bureau, an analyst smiled quietly, comparing his Michelin star feast to other pioneers' desperate struggles. In the Supreme Strategic Conference Room, top officials reviewed every seated candidate's dire situation across the globe. One soldier chewed poison earth just to identify medicine while a demon lord lurked nearby, waiting to strike. Foreign pioneers fared little better. Accidental fires, exploded bases provoked magical beast. Chaos on every front. Then someone asked about the kid in the permafrost tundra, and the room fell into stunned, disbelieving silence. The footage showed Lennon, jacket off, sweating happily, devouring rodent meat like a man on holiday. Not survival. An old chief laughed coldly. Everyone else is fighting for their lives, and that brat is having a damn picnic party. Another expert pressed for details. How long could this slacking off and feasting possibly last against the crisis? The old chief slammed the table, silencing the room. Proper relaxation is a vital part of wilderness survival. His shelter ranked 10th globally, and the apocalypse concerned the nation's entire destiny. They would keep watching closely. Back in his cavern, Lennon sliced meat and rendered fat with lightning precision. Movements so clean viewers called it legendary. He knew nothing of the secret meetings, the classified reports, or the growing fascination building around his every move. All he knew was the frozen ruins waiting 2.5 kilometers below him, and the power that might finally be his. The daily intelligence system had never once failed him, guiding him from certain death to feast after impossible feast. He finished his meal, banked the fire low, and prepared his gear for the descent into the deepest, most dangerous unknown yet. Somewhere below, ancient civilization ruins waited in silence, holding secrets that could reshape his entire fragile existence. Somewhere above, the frozen surface world continued its brutal, unforgiving harvest, claiming thousands more lives each single night. Lennon understood the stakes clearly now. Physical stats alone were merely the baseline in this new, merciless world order. Every survivor near the top of the leaderboard carried some hidden supernatural trump card he did not yet possess. If the Snow Wind Temple could grant him that same edge, the risk of descending into the unknown was worth taking completely. He checked his shovel, his coal, his remaining supplies, and steadied his nerves for whatever waited in the frozen dark below. The bat colony above still hung dormant, thousands of red trails pulsing faintly. A fortune he still could not safely touch. He made a mental note to return once properly armed. Understanding patience mattered as much as boldness in this brutal world. For now, the ruins called louder than any treasure trove of guano or pelts, promising something far more valuable, power itself. He extinguished his stove, wrapped himself against the deep chill of the tunnels, and began his careful descent into the dark. Every step downward took him further from daylight and deeper into a world few humans had ever dared to explore alive. The glowing blue thermal moss faded behind him, replaced by an oppressive, ancient darkness that pressed against his senses. His intelligence system flickered occasionally, offering faint guidance through passages that predated human civilization entirely. He thought of his family back home, safe now under capital protection. His sister's blindness finally within reach of a cure. Every risk he took down here was ultimately for them, for the nation watching, for the desperate hope of a better outcome. The tunnels narrowed, then widened again, revealing carved stone surfaces that could not possibly be natural formations. Ancient symbols, worn but unmistakably deliberate, marked the walls at regular intervals, guiding him deeper toward the pyramid. His breath caught each time the pale yellow guidance trail on his retina brightened, confirming he remained on the correct path. Somewhere far above, viewers who had tuned into his stream watched only static and darkness. Confused by the sudden silence, Lennon had chosen to go dark deliberately, understanding that broadcasting live into an unknown ruin invited unnecessary risk. Back home, the Intelligence Bureau noticed his signal drop instantly, triggering a fresh wave of concern among his growing following. Analysts debated whether he had died, been trapped, or simply gone offline intentionally. Unable to confirm anything definitively, the old chief remained calm amid the uncertainty, reminding the room that this pioneer had defied every expectation so far. "Trust the process," he said. "This kid has survived things that should have killed him a dozen times over already." Deep underground, Lennon pressed forward, his shovel gripped tight, every sense straining against the oppressive silence of the ruins. The inverted pyramid finally came into view, ancient and imposing, its surface etched with symbols glowing faint violet. A doorway stood open at its base, as if waiting specifically for him, an invitation carved from something far older than humanity. He hesitated only a moment before stepping through, understanding that hesitation now would waste everything he'd already survived. Inside, the air shifted immediately, warmer, charged with something electric that made the hair on his arms stand on end. A central chamber opened before him, its walls lined with dormant mechanisms that pulsed faintly with ancient, dormant power. At the chamber's center, a single pedestal held a glowing orb, pulsing gently, waiting for someone to finally claim it. Lennon approached carefully, scanning for traps, for guardians, for anything that might turn this treasure into a death sentence. Nothing stirred. The chamber remained silent, ancient, patient, as if it had been waiting specifically for someone like him. He reached out and touched the orb, and the entire chamber flared to life with blinding violet light all at once. Information flooded his mind faster than he could process. Ancient knowledge compressed into a single overwhelming instant. When the light finally faded, a new notification hovered before his eyes, confirming everything he'd risked to reach this moment. Supernatural ability acquired. Environmental resonance. You may now sense danger, resources, and pathways across vast distances. His intelligence system, already powerful, had just been supercharged beyond anything he'd previously imagined possible. He stumbled back from the pedestal, overwhelmed, understanding immediately that everything about his survival had just changed forever. No longer would he need to stumble blindly through blizzards, hoping his instincts held true against impossible odds. Now he could feel the world around him, sense its dangers and treasures alike, with a clarity no other pioneer possessed. He turned to leave the chamber, already planning how to use this new gift, when a final message flashed across his vision. Warning, ruin destabilizing. Ancient power depletes rapidly once claimed. Evacuate immediately or risk permanent collapse. The chamber walls began trembling, dust raining down from the ceiling, the pyramid itself groaning under sudden strain. Lennon ran, his newly awakened senses guiding him back through the tunnels faster than he'd ever moved. Underground before. Behind him, the ancient structure collapsed inward, sealing itself forever. Its secrets claimed and its purpose finally fulfilled. He emerged back into his familiar cavern gasping, covered in dust, but alive, and carrying something far more valuable than treasure. His stream flickered back online instantly, and the chat exploded with relief, then confusion at his disheveled, dust-covered appearance. He said nothing about the ruins directly, only that he'd found something worth the risk. Something that would change everything. Back at intelligence headquarters, sensors detected the sudden collapse deep underground, followed immediately by a massive power spike from Lennon. The old chief leaned forward, eyes narrowing with sharp interest. Whatever that boy just found, it had changed him fundamentally. Swan pulled up fresh scans, and her breath caught. Lennon's biological readings had shifted in ways she'd never seen before. Enhanced neural activity, expanded sensory range. This wasn't just a stat boost. This was genuine supernatural evolution. The room fell into stunned silence once again, everyone realizing simultaneously that their unlucky pioneer had just become something else entirely. Lennon, back in his cavern, tested his new senses carefully, reaching outward with his mind toward the frozen world beyond. Immediately, a flood of information cascaded through his awareness. Resources, dangers, pathways, all mapped with startling clarity. He could feel the bat colony above pulsing with dormant life, could sense the frost direwolf still prowling somewhere distant. He could even feel, faintly, the presence of other pioneers scattered across the frozen wasteland, struggling in their own private hells. This gift was staggering, terrifying in its scope, and Lennon understood immediately he needed to learn its limits carefully. He spent the following hours simply sitting in his cavern, reaching out with his new senses, mapping the world around him. Every resource hotspot he'd once driven past blindly now glowed clearly in his awareness, a treasure map spanning kilometers. He realized, with growing excitement, that he could now plan his hunts with surgical precision rather than desperate gambling. No more blind digging through permafrost, no more risking his life on uncertain instinct alone. Now he simply knew. This changed everything about his survival strategy, transforming him from a lucky gambler into a calculated, precise hunter. He decided to test his new ability immediately, reaching toward the bat colony he'd avoided out of simple necessity before. His enhanced senses revealed something crucial: the bat's vulnerability window, the precise moment their hibernation ran shallowest. Armed with this knowledge, he crafted a crude weapon from spare metal, sharpening it carefully against a rough cave wall. He approached the bat colony with newfound confidence, timing his movements exactly to the vulnerability window he'd sensed. One by one, he harvested bats with surgical efficiency, never triggering the colony's collective defensive awakening at all. By the time he finished, he'd claimed enough guano, pelts, and meat to fuel weeks of both survival and profit. His stream exploded once again, viewers stunned by his sudden shift from cautious survivor to precise, confident predator. Back home, his resource uploads that evening shattered every previous record he'd set, rocketing his ranking even higher. The Intelligence Bureau watched in growing amazement as Lennon's national fortune contribution climbed into genuinely elite territory. The old chief finally spoke the words nobody had dared say aloud until now. "This boy may become our strongest asset." Days passed, and Lennon's mastery over his new ability only deepened, his hunts growing more precise, his harvest more valuable. He began mapping the entire region methodically, marking every resource, every danger, every opportunity within his expanding senses. The permafrost tundra, once the deadliest zone on the planet, slowly transformed into his own private, well-mapped kingdom. Other pioneers in less hostile environments still struggled with basic survival, unaware that their supposed disadvantage had become his advantage. Lennon understood now why the intelligence system had guided him toward the ruins so insistently from the very beginning. This was never simply about surviving the deadliest zone on Earth. It was about becoming something greater than mere survival. He thought of his family, safe and cared for, his sister's cure now progressing steadily under top-tier medical care. Every hunt, every resource, every risk he took now carried a purpose beyond his own survival, a debt he intended to repay fully. The frost direwolf that had once marked him as prey returned one final time, drawn by the scent of his recent hunts. This time, Lennon sensed its approach from over a kilometer away, plenty of time to prepare a proper, decisive response. He met the creature not in desperate flight, but with calculated confidence, his enhanced senses reading its every intended movement. The battle that followed was brief and brutal, the direwolf's cunning proving no match for Lennon's newfound predictive awareness. He claimed its pelt, its fangs, and a core that pulsed with faint magical energy, another rare resource for his uploads. The system notification confirmed what he already suspected: Tier 1 magical beast core, exceptionally rare, substantial national bounty. His ranking, once languishing near the very bottom of the leaderboard, now sat comfortably within the global top 50. Back home, celebrations erupted quietly within the Intelligence Bureau. The once written-off tundra pioneer becoming a genuine point of pride. His parents watched the news with tears in their eyes. The son once dismissed as unlucky now spoken of with reverence. His little sister, undergoing treatment in the capital, asked daily whether her brother was safe, whether he was eating well. Linen, deep in his frozen fortress, continued his methodical expansion, each day bringing new resources, new confidence, new capability. He began to understand that his environmental resonance ability was still growing, its range and clarity expanding with continued use. What had once covered mere kilometers now stretched further each week, revealing an increasingly detailed picture of the wider tundra. He discovered other ruins in the distance, smaller than the Snow-Wind Temple, but potentially holding their own hidden secrets. He resolved to investigate them carefully, methodically, no longer rushing blindly into danger the way he once had out of desperation. Patience, he realized, had become his greatest weapon, more valuable even than his shovel, his snowmobile, or his supernatural senses. The boy who once nearly froze to death over a handful of worthless black moss had become something the entire nation watched closely. Not through luck alone, though luck had certainly played its part in that very first desperate night beneath the storm. Through stubborn refusal to give up, through calculated risk-taking, through turning a death sentence into an unexpected kingdom. The permafrost tundra remained the deadliest zone on the planet for everyone else who dared to enter it unprepared. For Linen, it had become something else entirely, a resource-rich domain, mapped and understood, a place he now called home. He stood at the edge of his cavern one quiet evening, looking out at the frozen wasteland stretching endlessly before him. Somewhere out there, other pioneers still struggled, still froze, still fought for scraps in environments far gentler than his own. Linen understood now that the true measure of survival was never about the harshness of your starting conditions alone. It was about what you built from those conditions, patiently, deliberately, one calculated risk and one hard-won victory at a time. He turned from the cavern's edge and walked back toward his glowing hearth, ready for whatever the frozen world sent next. His intelligence system pulsed quietly in the back of his mind, patient and ever-present, a companion through every impossible trial. Tomorrow would bring new hunts, new resources, new opportunities to strengthen both himself and the nation depending on his survival. Tonight, he simply rested, secure in a fortress few could imagine existed within the single deadliest zone on the entire planet. The story of the unluckiest pioneer had become the story of the tundra's most unexpected, most capable survivor of them all. It was not the story anyone had expected when a system first flashed red warnings of imminent, certain death. It was better, stranger, far more remarkable than the simple tale of a lucky pioneer stumbling through a frozen wasteland. Linen had once been dismissed as trash tier, an unlucky footnote destined to die within his very first week of survival. He had become, within a matter of days, one of the most closely watched and most respected pioneers on the entire planet. Not because destiny had chosen him for greatness, but because he refused again and again to simply lie down and die. His shovel, the humble tool that had cracked open his very first resource crate, remained his primary weapon even now. It hung within easy reach inside his cavern, a reminder of exactly where this impossible journey had first, desperately begun. The daily intelligence system continued refreshing each morning, offering new guidance, new opportunities, new paths toward continued survival. Linen approached each new day now with calculated confidence rather than desperate panic, understanding his environment as few others could. The bat colony above provided steady resources, the ruins below offered untold potential. His fortress kept him warm and safe. He had built from absolutely nothing but a single shovel and stubborn will, something resembling a genuine underground kingdom. His family back home thrived under national protection, his sister's blindness steadily healing under the finest medical care available. Every piece of this transformation traced back to that single desperate night, when he'd chosen to fight rather than freeze. The system had given him a chance. His own stubborn refusal to quit had turned that chance into genuine, lasting power. Somewhere across the frozen tundra, other pioneers continued their desperate struggles, unaware of the kingdom quietly rising beneath their notice. Linen intended to keep expanding, keep mapping, keep claiming every resource this brutal, unforgiving landscape still had hidden within it. Not for glory alone, though the nation's growing respect certainly felt satisfying after years of being overlooked and dismissed, but for the simple, stubborn satisfaction of proving that even the deadliest starting conditions could be conquered. Through patience, he settled into his warm cavern that evening, his intelligence system humming quietly in the back of his awareness. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new resources, New test of everything he learned since that first terrifying, frozen night. Tonight, he simply rested, secure in a fortress built from nothing but desperation, cunning, and an unbreakable will to survive. The permafrost tundra had tried again and again to kill him in every conceivable way a frozen wasteland could manage, and every single time, Lennon had refused to let it win, turning each brush with death into another hard-won advantage. That refusal, more than any system power or supernatural ability, remained the truest measure of everything he had become. He closed his eyes that night with the quiet confidence of a man who understood exactly what he'd built from nothing. Not an accident, not simple luck. A genuine, hard-won kingdom carved from the single deadliest environment on the entire planet. The story of the unluckiest pioneer had become the story of the tundra's most dangerous, most resourceful survivor of them all. And his journey, everyone watching now understood, was still only just beginning. Weeks passed, and Lennon's reputation continued growing steadily across every corner of the watching world, both foreign and domestic. His resource uploads remained consistently strong, his ranking stabilizing comfortably within the global elite for the very first time. He began training deliberately now, understanding that raw survival instinct alone would not carry him through whatever challenges still waited ahead. His shovel work grew more refined, his hunting more efficient, his understanding of the tundra's hidden dangers ever more complete. The Intelligence Bureau continued monitoring him closely, though their concern had long since shifted toward genuine, quiet admiration instead. Swan, once skeptical of his early lucky breaks, now studied his methods carefully. Recognizing genuine skill beneath the apparent fortune, she began compiling detailed reports on his survival techniques, hoping to eventually share lessons with other struggling pioneers nationwide. The old chief, satisfied with Lennon's continued progress, allowed the young pioneer increasing autonomy in his decision-making. Trust had been earned through repeated demonstration, through consistent results, through a pattern of success too clear to dismiss any longer. Lennon, for his part, remained largely unaware of the growing fascination surrounding him. Focused entirely on the practical work of survival, he discovered, through careful use of his environmental resonance, a network of underground rivers connecting several distant resource zones. These rivers, warmed slightly by geothermal activity, hosted their own unique ecosystem of cold-resistant fish and strange aquatic plants. He began systematically exploring this network, each expedition yielding new resources, new understanding, new pieces of the tundra's hidden puzzle. His family, watching from the safety of their capital district apartment, followed his continued adventures with mixture of pride and worry. His sister's treatment progressed steadily, doctors expressing genuine optimism about a full recovery within the coming months ahead. She often asked to hear updates about her brother's exploits, delighted by every new discovery he made in that frozen world. Lennon made a point of recording brief messages for her specifically, describing the strange beauty hidden within his dangerous domain. The glowing thermal moss, the crystal-clear underground rivers, the strange, beautiful creatures that called this frozen world home. Through his descriptions, even a place as deadly as the permafrost tundra began to sound almost magical, almost wonderful. His sister treasured these messages deeply, playing them repeatedly, imagining the world her brother described in such loving detail. Meanwhile, Lennon's exploration of the underground river network led him to a discovery that would reshape his understanding entirely. A massive cavern, larger even than his own shelter, filled with bioluminescent plant life unlike anything cataloged before. His environmental resonance flared with unusual intensity here, suggesting something significant lay hidden within this strange, glowing garden. He approached carefully, methodically, applying every lesson learned from his previous encounter with the ancient ruins below his home. At the garden's center stood a single, massive tree, its bark glowing with the same violet energy he'd seen in the pyramid. This was no ordinary tree. This was something ancient, something powerful, something that had waited patiently for the right person to find it. He approached with the same careful respect he'd shown the ruins, understanding that ancient power demanded caution rather than greed. The tree's presence seemed to acknowledge him somehow, its glow intensifying subtly as he drew near its massive trunk. A single fruit hung from its lowest branch, glowing softly, clearly meant for someone to claim rather than simply admire. Lennon reached out carefully, plucking the fruit gently, and immediately felt a surge of warmth spread through his entire body. System notification, world tree fruit consumed. Permanent attribute enhancement across all categories. Cold resistance further amplified. This was beyond anything he'd expected, a gift from the ancient world itself. Rewarding his patience and careful respect, he left the garden that day feeling fundamentally changed once again, his body humming with newfound strength and resilience. Back home, sensors detected another massive spike in his biological readings, sending the Intelligence Bureau into renewed excitement. Whatever Linen kept discovering in that frozen wasteland, it continued exceeding every expectation the nation's experts had ever calculated. The old chief began referring to him openly now as a genuine national treasure, a designation reserved for only the rarest talents. Linen's family received word of this designation with a mixture of pride and quiet disbelief, still adjusting to their new reality. The uncle who had once mocked them, who had plotted to steal their pension, now sent increasingly desperate messages seeking reconciliation. Linen's father, remembering every cruelty shown during their darkest days, chose to simply ignore every single one of them. Some debts, he understood now, were not worth repaying with forgiveness, especially when true family had never once abandoned them. Back in the frozen wilderness, Linen continued his careful, methodical expansion, each discovery building steadily upon the last. He began cataloging the tundra's unique resources systematically, creating detailed mental maps that supplemented his supernatural environmental sense. This combination of instinct and methodical planning made him increasingly efficient. His survival no longer a matter of desperate luck. It had become, instead, a matter of skilled, deliberate mastery over an environment that had once seemed utterly impossible to conquer. Other nations began quietly requesting information about the permafrost tundra survivor, curious about methods that seemed to defy explanation. Gracia's Intelligence Bureau remained deliberately vague in their responses, protecting what had become a genuine strategic advantage. Linen's continued success reflected directly on the nation's overall standing, his resource contributions steadily improving their global position. The cold wave penalties that had once plagued his homeland had long since reversed into genuine bonuses and improved conditions instead. Citizens across Great Sha spoke his name with genuine reverence now. The once unlucky pioneer transformed into a symbol of hope. Children in schools studied simplified versions of his survival strategies, inspired by a story that felt almost impossibly heroic. Linen himself remained largely unaware of his growing legend, focused entirely on the next hunt, the next discovery, the next challenge. He understood on some fundamental level that stopping to admire his own success would only invite the complacency that killed pioneers. The tundra remained deadly, patient, and ever watchful, ready to punish any moment of carelessness with immediate, brutal consequence. He respected that danger constantly, never allowing his growing power to translate into the arrogance that had doomed lesser pioneers. This humility, combined with his supernatural senses and hard-won skill, made him increasingly formidable with each passing week. His shelter continued expanding as he cleared more of the vast cavern, creating dedicated spaces for storage, crafting, and rest. He began experimenting with the bat pelts he'd harvested, crafting improved cold weather gear that further enhanced his survival capability. Each improvement compounded upon the last, creating a virtuous cycle of growing strength, growing resources, and growing strategic advantage. The frozen wasteland that had once seemed like a certain death sentence had transformed, piece by piece, into genuine opportunity. Linen often reflected on this transformation during quiet moments beside his fire, marveling at how far he'd come from that first night. The boy who had nearly frozen to death over worthless black moss now commanded resources that rivaled seated elite pioneers, not through inherited privilege, not through special training, but through stubborn refusal to accept the death sentence he'd been handed. This lesson, more than any single resource or ability, felt like the truest treasure his impossible journey had given him so far. He intended to carry that lesson forward, applying it to every future challenge the frozen wasteland still had waiting for him. Because he understood now, completely and finally, that starting conditions never determined final outcomes in this brutal new world. Patience, cunning, and stubborn will could transform even the deadliest beginning into something worth genuine pride and lasting achievement. The daily intelligence system continued its faithful morning refresh, offering new guidance for whatever the tundra revealed next. Linen greeted each new day now with the quiet confidence of a survivor, who had earned every single advantage he possessed. Not given, earned, through desperate nights, through calculated risks, through the stubborn refusal to simply lie down and die. His story, still unfolding, had already become something the entire watching world would remember long after this brutal era ended. Not the story of the unluckiest pioneer, doomed from the very moment he landed in the deadliest zone on the planet, but the story of the tundra's most remarkable survivor, who turned certain death into an unexpected, hard-won kingdom of his own. Months into his impossible journey, Linen stood once more at the edge of his cavern, surveying the frozen domain he now called home. The permafrost tundra stretched endlessly in every direction, still deadly, still unforgiving, but no longer a stranger to him. He knew its rivers, its ruins, its hidden gardens, its dangerous predators, and its precious, life-sustaining resources intimately now. This knowledge, hard-won through relentless struggle, had transformed him from a desperate victim into a genuine master of his environment. Somewhere across the wider world, other pioneers continued their own struggles, some thriving, many still fighting for basic survival. Lennon thought of them sometimes, understanding that his own path, however remarkable, remained just one story among countless others unfolding. Each pioneer faced their own version of the same brutal test, their own environment demanding its own particular brand of sacrifice. He had been dealt the harshest hand of all, yet had transformed that disadvantage into what many now considered genuine advantage. This transformation, he understood, offered a lesson worth sharing eventually, once his own survival felt secure enough to spare the attention. For now, though, his focus remained fixed on the immediate work of continued survival, continued growth, continued careful expansion. The Intelligence Bureau back home continued their careful monitoring, though genuine concern had long since given way to confident admiration. The old chief spoke of him now in strategic planning sessions as a cornerstone of the nation's overall pioneer program. Other struggling pioneers received modified versions of lessons learned from Lennon's methodical, patient approach to hostile environments. His story, though still unfolding, had already begun shaping national survival strategy in ways few could have predicted at the start. Lennon remained humble through all of this recognition, understanding that the tundra could still claim his life with a single careless mistake. He continued training diligently, continued expanding his map territory carefully, continued respecting the brutal power of his frozen domain. His family, secure now in the capital district, watched his continued journey with pride that had long since replaced their earlier fear. His sister's treatment neared completion, doctors expressing confidence that her sight would fully return within the coming weeks ahead. Lennon received this news with quiet, overwhelming relief, understanding that every risk he'd taken had finally paid off completely. This had always been his deepest motivation, buried beneath the daily grind of survival, the hope of curing his sister's blindness. Now, with that goal finally within reach, he felt a new sense of purpose settle over his continued work in the frozen wilderness. Not just personal survival, not just national duty, but the simple, profound satisfaction of having genuinely helped someone he loved. He continued his careful exploration of the underground world, discovering new resources, new dangers, new pieces of the tundra's hidden puzzle. Each discovery added to both his personal strength and his nation's growing resource reserves, a partnership built on mutual benefit. The cold wave that had once threatened his homeland had long since stabilized, thanks in large part to his consistent contributions. Citizens who had once shivered through resource shortages now enjoyed genuine comfort, their gratitude directed largely toward his continued sacrifice. Lennon felt the weight of this responsibility keenly, understanding that his continued survival mattered for reasons far beyond himself alone. This weight, rather than crushing him, seemed instead to sharpen his focus, his determination, his careful respect for the dangers around him. He approached each new day now with the balanced confidence of a man who understood both his growing strength and its clear limits. The tundra remained patient, watchful, ready to punish carelessness with immediate consequence. And Lennon respected that reality completely. This respect, combined with his hard-won skill and supernatural senses, made him increasingly difficult for the environment to threaten. He had transformed, through months of relentless struggle, into something the permafrost tundra itself seemed almost reluctant to challenge directly. Not through domination, not through brute conquest, but through patient, careful mastery earned one impossible survival at a time. His story, still unfolding across the watching world, had become a testament to what stubborn will could accomplish against impossible odds. The system that had first flashed warnings of certain death now served as his faithful guide. Through an ever-expanding, hard-won domain, he understood now that the daily intelligence system had never simply been a cheat code, handed to him by pure chance alone. It had been a tool, powerful, but demanding, requiring courage, patience, and stubborn will to properly utilize its full potential. Many pioneers, given the same system, might have frozen in fear rather than charging into blizzards to claim its guidance. Lennon's willingness to risk everything, repeatedly against impossible odds, had ultimately proven the true source of his remarkable success. Not the system alone, not luck alone, but the stubborn, desperate courage to act on the guidance it provided again and again. This lesson felt like the truest treasure of his entire impossible journey, more valuable even than any resource or ability gained. He carried that lesson forward now, into every future challenge the frozen wasteland still had patiently waiting for him ahead, because he understood, completely and finally, That courage combined with careful guidance could conquer even the deadliest circumstances imaginable. The permafrost tundra had tried repeatedly to kill him, and repeatedly, through stubborn will alone. He had refused to let it win. That refusal remained the truest measure of everything Lennon had become. Since that first desperate night beneath the raging blizzard. Not an accident, not simple fortune, a genuine, hard-won mastery earned through relentless struggle against the harshest odds imaginable. The story of the unluckiest pioneer had become, definitively, the story of the tundra's most remarkable, most respected survivor of all. His journey, everyone watching now understood clearly, represented something far greater than mere personal triumph over impossible circumstances. It represented hope, for every pioneer facing seemingly impossible odds. That stubborn will and careful courage could overcome any starting disadvantage. Lennon stood at his cavern's edge one final quiet evening, watching the frozen tundra stretch endlessly toward the horizon beyond. Somewhere out there, his story continued inspiring pioneers across every corner of the watching world, both foreign and domestic alike. Somewhere back home, his family prepared for his sister's final treatment, confident now in a recovery once thought impossible. Lennon turned from the cavern's edge, walked back toward his glowing hearth, and prepared for whatever the frozen world sent next. His intelligence system pulsed quietly in the back of his awareness, patient and ever-present, his faithful companion through every trial. Tomorrow would bring new hunts, new discoveries, new opportunities to strengthen both himself and the nation depending on his continued survival. Tonight, he simply rested, secure in a fortress built from nothing but desperation, stubborn will, and an unbreakable refusal to quit. The permafrost tundra remained the deadliest zone on the entire planet, exactly as harsh, exactly as unforgiving as it had always been. But Lennon had proven, decisively and repeatedly, that even the harshest environment could be conquered through patience and stubborn courage. His story was not finished. It would likely never truly finish, as long as the frozen wasteland continued offering new challenges. But this chapter, the chapter of transformation from unlucky victim to remarkable survivor, had reached its own natural, satisfying conclusion. Lennon closed his eyes that night with the quiet confidence of a man who understood exactly what he had built from nothing. Not luck, not privilege, a genuine, hard-won kingdom carved from the single deadliest environment the entire watching world had ever known. The daily intelligence system chimed softly one final time that evening, confirming his continued survival for yet another impossible day. Lennon smiled faintly, grateful for the guidance, grateful for his own stubborn will, grateful for everything this impossible journey had taught him. Tomorrow the sun would rise, however faintly, over a frozen wasteland he now understood better than any other pioneer alive. And Lennon, shovel in hand, intelligence system humming faithfully in his mind, would be ready for whatever it revealed to him. Because he had learned, through every desperate night and every hard-won victory, the truest lesson this brutal new world had to offer. Courage combined with careful guidance could transform even the deadliest starting conditions into genuine, lasting, hard-won triumph. The unluckiest pioneer had become the tundra's most remarkable survivor, and his impossible journey was, in every meaningful sense, still just beginning. Word of Lennon's continued success eventually reached beyond Grecia's borders, other nations quietly studying his methods from a distance. The Sakura Kingdom's analyst, once openly mocking, now examined his footage with growing professional respect and grudging admiration. Even Yamamoto Ichiro, the researcher who had once sneered at Grecia's pioneers, privately acknowledged Lennon's genuine, remarkable skill. This shift in international perception mattered little to Lennon himself, focused as he remained on the practical work of survival. He continued his careful expansion of map territory, each week revealing new resources, new dangers, new pieces of the tundra's puzzle. The underground river network eventually connected to an even larger cavern system, hinting at a vast subterranean world still unexplored. Lennon approached this deeper mystery with the same careful patience that had served him so well throughout his entire journey. He understood now that rushing blindly into unknown danger, however tempting the potential reward, invited exactly the kind of carelessness that killed. Better to expand slowly, methodically, building strength and understanding before committing to any truly significant new risk. This patient approach, so different from his desperate early days, reflected the genuine transformation his character had undergone since that first night. He was no longer simply reacting to immediate threats. He was planning, strategizing, building toward a genuinely sustainable long-term future. His family's situation continued improving steadily, his sister's treatment reaching its final, most critical stage back in the capital. Doctors remained cautiously optimistic. though the final results would not be known for certain until the treatment fully completed. Lennon received daily updates through his communication device, each report filling him with a mixture of hope and nervous anticipation. He continued his work in the frozen wilderness regardless, understanding that stopping now would waste every sacrifice made so far. The nation's overall standing continued improving as well, his consistent resource contributions helping stabilize what had once been a dire situation. Citizens across Great Shaw now spoke of the permafrost tundra pioneer with genuine national pride, his story inspiring countless others. Children wrote school essays about his survival strategies. Adults discussed his exploits with the same enthusiasm once reserved for celebrities. Lennon remained largely unaware of this growing cultural phenomenon, his attention fixed entirely on the immediate demands of his frozen domain. He understood on some fundamental level that fame and recognition meant nothing if he allowed them to distract from continued vigilance. The tundra remained exactly as deadly as it had always been, patient and ever watchful, ready to punish any moment of complacency. Lennon respected this reality completely, never allowing his growing strength or growing reputation to erode his fundamental caution and respect. This balance, between confidence and caution, between growing power and continued humility, had become the defining characteristic of his approach. It was this balance, more than any single resource or supernatural ability, that had ultimately carried him through impossible odds thus far. And it was this same balance that would continue carrying him forward, through whatever challenges the frozen wasteland still had waiting. Weeks turned into months, and Lennon's mastery over the permafrost tundra continued deepening with each passing, hard-won day. His environmental resonance ability had grown considerably since that first activation. Deep within the ancient snow-wind temple ruins, what once covered mere kilometers, now stretched across a significant portion of the entire regional forbidden zone he called home. He could sense approaching weather systems days in advance now, giving him ample time to prepare or relocate as needed. He could detect predator movements from remarkable distances, allowing him to avoid unnecessary conflict or prepare for calculated confrontation. This expanded awareness transformed his daily routine from desperate survival into something resembling confident, strategic domain management instead. He began documenting his discoveries more carefully now, understanding that this knowledge might eventually help other struggling pioneers survive. His detailed notes covered everything from resource locations to predator behavior patterns, to the subtle signs of incoming weather changes. The Intelligence Bureau back home requested copies of these notes, hoping to distribute simplified versions to pioneers in similar harsh zones. Lennon agreed readily, understanding that his own hard-won knowledge could potentially save countless other lives, facing similar impossible odds. This act of generosity, sharing knowledge that had cost him so much struggle to acquire, reflected a genuine shift in his character. He was no longer simply fighting for his own survival, his family's benefit. He was fighting for something larger now, the broader community of pioneers, struggling across countless different environments, each facing their own version of his impossible circumstances. This shift in perspective felt natural to him, a logical extension of the lessons his own brutal journey had taught him. Survival, he understood now, was rarely a purely individual achievement. It was built on shared knowledge, mutual support, hard-won wisdom. His own success had come partly through the system's guidance, but also through the support of a nation invested in his survival. Passing that support forward to others felt like the only appropriate response to everything he had been given throughout his journey. The Intelligence Bureau began compiling his notes into a comprehensive survival guide, distributed carefully to struggling pioneers across Great Shaw. Early reports suggested genuine improvement in survival rates among pioneers, who had access to even simplified versions of his hard-won wisdom. This success brought Lennon a quiet, profound satisfaction that rivaled even his own personal survival achievements. Throughout the entire journey, he continued his own exploration in parallel, discovering new resources, new dangers, new pieces of the tundra's endlessly complex puzzle. The larger cavern system he had discovered through the underground river network finally revealed its true nature after weeks of careful study. It was not simply an extension of natural geology, but another ancient structure, smaller than the snow-wind temple but no less significant. This new ruin pulsed with different energy than the first, colder, more contained, suggesting a different purpose entirely from its predecessor. Lennon approached with the same careful patience that had served him so well before, understanding that ancient power demanded genuine respect. Inside, he found not a single pedestal with an orb, but an entire chamber lined with dormant, ancient technology of unknown purpose. His environmental resonance flared intensely here, suggesting this location held something even more significant than his previous supernatural discovery. He proceeded carefully, documenting everything he observed, understanding that whatever waited here deserved careful study rather than reckless haste. At the chamber's heart, he found a smaller pedestal holding not an orb, but a crystalline shard pulsing with pale blue light. This felt different from his first discovery, more contained, more specific in its apparent purpose. Though equally ancient and powerful, he reached out carefully and touched the shard, and immediately felt a different kind of information flood through his awareness. This was not a new ability being granted, but rather knowledge itself, ancient understanding of the very system governing this brutal new world. He learned, in that overwhelming instant, fragments of the true purpose behind the Pioneer program, behind the sealed resources, behind everything. This was not simply a survival test. It was preparation, cultivation of humanity's strongest individuals for something far larger still to come. The advanced civilization that had sealed away Blue Star's resources was not simply testing pioneers for its own arbitrary amusement. It was identifying, cultivating, and preparing humanity's strongest survivors for eventual integration into something vastly larger and more significant. This revelation staggered Lennon, reshaping his entire understanding of the brutal trials he and countless others have been enduring. He understood now that his own continued growth, his own accumulating strength and knowledge, served a purpose far beyond mere personal survival. The chamber's information faded gradually, leaving him with fragments of understanding rather than complete, comprehensive knowledge of the full picture. But even these fragments changed everything about how he approached his continued journey. Through this brutal, transformative new world, he emerged from the second ruin more thoughtful, more purposeful, understanding that his path ahead likely held challenges beyond simple survival. Back home, sensors detected another significant shift in his biological and cognitive readings, prompting renewed fascination at the Intelligence Bureau. The old chief, reviewing the latest reports, began to suspect that Lennon's journey represented something far more significant than initially believed. He ordered increased resources allocated toward supporting Lennon's continued exploration, understanding the potential strategic value of whatever he might uncover. Lennon, for his part, continued his careful, methodical approach, balancing continued survival needs with his growing thirst for deeper understanding. He began documenting not just practical survival knowledge now, but philosophical observations about the true nature of this brutal new world. These observations, shared carefully with the Intelligence Bureau, began shaping broader strategic discussions about humanity's overall place in this trial. Other pioneers, receiving simplified versions of his survival guides, began achieving improved results across various different forbidden zones globally. Greatsh's overall standing in the global pioneer rankings continued improving steadily, thanks in significant part to Lennon's shared knowledge. This collective improvement brought a different kind of satisfaction than his own personal achievements, a sense of contributing to something larger. Lennon continued his exploration of the tundra's remaining mysteries, understanding that more ruins, more ancient knowledge likely waited to be found. He approached each new discovery now with a blend of his original stubborn courage and his newly developed careful, patient wisdom. This balance, forged through months of relentless struggle and genuine personal growth, made him increasingly capable of handling whatever waited ahead. His family's situation continued its steady improvement as well, his sister's treatment finally reaching its long-awaited, critical conclusion. The day finally arrived when doctors confirmed complete success. His sister's sight had been fully restored after months of careful treatment. Lennon received this news with overwhelming emotion, tears streaming down his face despite the frozen wilderness surrounding him at that moment. Every risk, every desperate night, every impossible survival had ultimately led to the single, profound moment of genuine, complete triumph. His sister's first words upon seeing clearly again were reportedly about wanting to see her brother's face, wanting to thank him properly. Lennon promised, through his communication device, that he would return home eventually, once his current mission reached a natural conclusion. For now, though, the frozen wilderness still called to him, still held mysteries worth uncovering, still offered opportunities worth pursuing carefully. He understood that his sister's recovery, while deeply personal and profoundly meaningful, did not mean his broader mission was complete. The advanced civilization's trial continued. The nation's fortunes remained tied to his continued success, and countless mysteries still awaited discovery. He resolved to continue his careful, methodical exploration, understanding that his personal victory represented just one chapter in a much larger story. The permafrost tundra, though increasingly familiar to him, still held secrets worthy of the same careful respect he had shown from the very beginning. He continued his systematic exploration of the underground world, discovering additional smaller ruins scattered throughout the vast subterranean network. Each ruin offered its own unique fragment of knowledge, its own piece of the larger puzzle regarding the true purpose behind this brutal trial. Lenin began to understand, gradually, that the pioneers being tested across the globe were not merely competing against each other. They were, in some larger sense, being prepared collectively for a challenge that would eventually require humanity's combined strength and knowledge. This understanding shifted his perspective once again, transforming his relationship with other pioneers from pure competition toward cautious cooperation. He began sharing select pieces of his discoveries with the Intelligence Bureau, understanding that broader preparation served everyone's ultimate interest. The old chief, receiving these increasingly significant reports, began coordinating quietly with allied nations regarding shared strategic preparation efforts. This careful, measured cooperation between traditionally competitive nations represented a genuine shift in how the Pioneer program was being approached. Lenin's discoveries, shared judiciously, became a catalyst for broader international cooperation that had previously seemed impossible, given national rivalries. He continued his own personal journey throughout this broader shift, understanding that his individual survival remained crucial to the larger effort. The frozen wilderness continued testing him regularly, presenting new challenges that demanded the full application of his hard-won skills. A pack of mutated ice wolves, larger and more coordinated than the solitary direwolf he'd previously encountered, tested his defenses severely. He met this challenge with calculated confidence, his environmental resonance allowing him to anticipate their coordinated movements with remarkable precision. The battle proved difficult, pushing his physical and strategic capabilities to their absolute limits, but ultimately ended in decisive victory. He harvested valuable resources from the defeated pack, further strengthening both his personal capabilities and his ongoing national contributions. This victory, hard-won and genuinely earned, reinforced his growing confidence in his ability to handle whatever the tundra still had waiting. He continued expanding his map territory steadily, each new discovery adding to both his practical knowledge and his broader strategic understanding. The Intelligence Bureau's compiled survival guides, based partly on his ongoing discoveries, continued improving outcomes for pioneers across various zones. Great's global standing continued its steady climb, no longer the desperate, struggling nation it had been at the very beginning. This transformation, built substantially on Lenin's individual contributions, represented a genuine national success story that inspired countless citizens. He remained humble throughout this growing recognition, understanding that continued vigilance and careful respect for danger remained absolutely essential. The tundra, despite his growing mastery, remained capable of lethal surprise, and Lenin never allowed himself to forget this fundamental truth. He continued training rigorously, continued expanding his knowledge carefully, continued approaching each new challenge with appropriate caution and respect. This balanced approach, neither reckless nor overly timid, had ultimately proven the key to his sustained, remarkable success throughout this journey. Months into his continued exploration, Lenin discovered evidence suggesting the ancient civilization's ruins extended far beyond his own regional zone. Similar structures, according to fragmentary knowledge gleaned from his discoveries, existed scattered throughout forbidden zones across the entire planet. This suggested a coordinated, global preparation effort orchestrated by the advanced civilization, far more extensive than any single nation had realized. He shared this significant discovery with the Intelligence Bureau, prompting urgent discussions about the true scope of the ongoing pioneer trial. The old chief, digesting this new information, began coordinating even more extensively with allied nations regarding shared strategic preparation. This growing cooperation, built substantially on Lenin's continued discoveries, represented a genuine shift in how humanity approached this brutal trial. Lenin continued his personal exploration throughout these broader developments, understanding that his individual journey remained crucial to the larger effort. He approached each new day now with a clear sense of purpose that extended far beyond his own personal survival and family's welfare. This purpose, discovered gradually through months of careful exploration and genuine personal growth, gave new meaning to his continued struggle. He was no longer simply the unluckiest pioneer, struggling to survive an impossible starting environment against overwhelming odds. He had become something far more significant, a key contributor to humanity's broader preparation for whatever ultimate challenge still awaited. The story of Lenin's journey, still unfolding across the watching world, had transformed from personal survival tale into something genuinely historic. He stood once more at the edge of his cavern, looking out at the frozen tundra that had once seemed like a death sentence. Now it felt like something else entirely, a proving ground, a training environment, a place where his true potential had finally emerged. Somewhere out there, across countless forbidden zones scattered around the globe, other pioneers continued their own versions of this same trial. Lenin understood now that they were all, in some fundamental sense, part of the same larger story. the same broader preparation effort. This understanding brought a strange comfort, knowing that his own struggles connected to something larger than simple individual survival alone. He turned from the cavern's edge, walked back toward his glowing hearth, and prepared for whatever the frozen world revealed next. His intelligence system pulsed quietly in the back of his awareness, patient and ever-present, his faithful guide through this entire journey. Tomorrow would bring new discoveries, new challenges, new opportunities to contribute to both his nation's survival and humanity's broader preparation. Tonight, he simply rested, secure in a fortress built from nothing but desperation, stubborn will, and a growing sense of larger purpose. The permafrost tundra remained the deadliest zone on the entire planet, exactly as harsh and unforgiving as it had always been. But Lennon had proven, decisively and repeatedly, that even the harshest environment could become a foundation for genuine growth and purpose. His story continued unfolding, chapter by chapter, each one building upon the last towards something neither he nor anyone else fully understood yet. But he approached this uncertain future with the same stubborn courage and careful wisdom that had carried him through every previous trial, because he had learned, through every desperate night and every hard-won victory, that uncertainty itself could be conquered through patient preparation. The unluckiest pioneer had become something the entire watching world now recognized as genuinely remarkable, genuinely significant, genuinely heroic. And his journey, everyone understood clearly now, represented only the beginning of a much larger story still waiting to unfold completely. Lennon closed his eyes that night with quiet confidence, understanding that whatever came next, he would face it with everything he had learned. Not as the unlucky pioneer dismissed and forgotten by a world to focused on easier, more fortunate starting conditions elsewhere, but as someone who had transformed the deadliest possible circumstances into genuine mastery, genuine purpose, genuine contribution to something larger. The daily intelligence system chimed softly one final time that evening, confirming yet another day of successful, purposeful survival completed. Lennon smiled faintly, grateful for the system's guidance, grateful for his own stubborn will, grateful for everything this journey had taught him. Tomorrow the frozen sun would rise faintly over a tundra he now understood intimately, a domain he had earned through relentless struggle. And Lennon, shovel in hand, intelligence system humming faithfully, environmental resonance extending across kilometers of hard-won territory, would be ready. Ready for whatever the frozen world revealed next. Ready for whatever larger purpose his continued journey might eventually fully reveal. Because he had learned definitively and completely the truest lesson this brutal new world had ever offered any struggling pioneer. Courage combined with patience, guided by careful wisdom, could transform even the deadliest circumstances into genuine, lasting, meaningful triumph. The unluckiest pioneer had become the tundra's most remarkable survivor, and his impossible journey remained, in every meaningful sense, still unfolding. Back home, his family celebrated his sister's full recovery with quiet joy. Grateful beyond words for everything Lennon had sacrificed, his parents watched his continued adventures with pride that had long since eclipsed their earlier fear, understanding his genuine significance now. The neighbors who once mocked them, the relatives who once schemed against them, had long since faded into irrelevant, distant memory. What remained was simply a family, transformed by impossible circumstances, united by genuine love and hard-won, well-deserved gratitude. Lennon continued his work in the frozen wilderness, understanding that this chapter of his story, however remarkable, remained only one chapter. The advanced civilization's true purpose, the ultimate challenge awaiting humanity's prepared pioneers, remained largely mysterious despite his growing understanding. He resolved to continue uncovering these mysteries carefully, patiently, contributing whatever knowledge he gained toward humanity's broader preparation effort. This resolution, born from months of genuine personal transformation, defined his continued approach to every subsequent challenge still waiting ahead. The permafrost tundra, once his prison, had become his proving ground, his training environment, his genuine foundation for continued growth. He understood now that starting conditions, however harsh, never truly determined final outcomes in this brutal, transformative new world order. Patience, cunning, and stubborn will, applied consistently over time, could transform even certain death into genuine, lasting achievement. This lesson, learned through months of relentless struggle, felt like the truest treasure his entire impossible journey had given him. He carried it forward now, into every future challenge the frozen wasteland and the broader pioneer trial still had waiting for him, because he had proven, decisively and repeatedly, exactly what courage combined with careful wisdom could accomplish against impossible odds. The story of the unluckiest pioneer had become the story of humanity's remarkable resilience against even the most impossible circumstances. And Lennon, standing at the edge of his frozen domain, understood that this story was far from finished, far from fully told. Tomorrow would bring new discoveries, new challenges, new opportunities to prove that even the deadliest beginning could yield genuine triumph. He turned from the cavern's edge one final time that evening, walked back toward his glowing hearth, and settled in for well-earned rest. His intelligence system pulsed quietly, patient and faithful, ready to guide him through whatever the frozen world revealed come morning light. Lennon closed his eyes, grateful for his sister's recovery, grateful for his family's safety, grateful for everything this journey had taught him. Tomorrow the sun would rise faintly over the permafrost tundra, and Lennon would be ready, exactly as he had always been for anything. Because he had learned, through every single trial this brutal world had thrown against him, that readiness itself could be cultivated through will. The unluckiest pioneer had become something genuinely remarkable, and his story, still unfolding, promised only greater triumphs still to come. Years from this point, historians studying the pioneer program's early days would return repeatedly to Lennon's story as a defining example, not of luck, though luck had certainly played its part in that very first desperate night beneath the raging blizzard's fury, but of stubborn human will, refusing to accept a death sentence, transforming the deadliest possible circumstances into genuine, lasting triumph. His survival guides, distributed eventually across every participating nation, saved countless lives among pioneers facing their own impossible odds. His discoveries regarding the ancient civilization's true purpose helped shape humanity's broader preparation for whatever ultimate challenge still awaited. His personal transformation, from unlucky victim to remarkable master of his environment, inspired generations of future pioneers who followed. But for Lennon himself, none of this future recognition mattered nearly as much as the simple, profound moments that defined his actual journey. The first bite of silver star grilled fish that saved his life, the first glimpse of his S-glass shelter's glowing moss, the moment his sister's sight was fully restored, the quiet satisfaction of watching his survival guides save other pioneers' lives. These moments, more than any grand historical legacy, represented the truest measure of everything his impossible journey had actually meant. He continued his work in the frozen wilderness day after day, discovery after discovery, never losing sight of these simple truths. The tundra remained deadly, remained unforgiving, remained exactly as harsh as it had always been since that very first desperate night. But Lennon had proven, through months of relentless struggle, that even the deadliest environment could become a genuine foundation for growth. His story, still unfolding across the watching world, remained a testament to what stubborn human will could accomplish against impossible odds. And as he stood at the edge of his frozen domain each evening, watching the sun set faintly over the endless white expanse, Lennon understood, completely and finally, that his journey had never truly been about escaping the permafrost tundra's deadly grip alone. It had been about transforming that deadly grip into something else entirely. Something worth genuine pride, something worth lasting achievement. The unluckiest pioneer had become the tundra's most remarkable survivor, and his impossible journey remained, in every meaningful sense, ongoing. Ready for whatever tomorrow revealed, ready for whatever larger purpose his continued path might eventually fully unveil to the watching world, because he had learned, through every single trial this brutal new world had ever thrown against him, the truest lesson of all, that circumstances, however harsh, however seemingly impossible, could always be transformed through patience, courage, and stubborn, unbreakable human will. This was Lennon's story, not finished, never truly finished, but forever defined by the moment he chose to fight rather than freeze. The moment a system chimed softly in the darkness, offering guidance to a boy who refused to simply lie down and die. The moment 80 meters of blizzard became the first step toward an impossible, remarkable, genuinely historic journey of pure human survival. And somewhere, deep beneath the frozen tundra, his intelligence system continued pulsing faithfully, ready for whatever came next in this story. Lennon slept soundly that final night of this chapter, secure in his fortress, secure in his family's safety, secure in his purpose. Tomorrow would bring new tests, new discoveries, new chances to prove that even the deadliest beginning could yield extraordinary, lasting triumph. And he would face them all exactly as he always had, with stubborn courage, careful wisdom, and an intelligence system that never lied. The permafrost tundra's most unlikely survivor had become its most remarkable master, and the watching world would never forget his name. Not Lennon the unlucky, not Lennon the trash-tier pioneer dismissed within his first week. Simply Lennon, the tundra's true conqueror. His shovel still hung within easy reach inside his glowing cavern, a humble reminder of exactly where this journey had first begun. And every single night, as the daily intelligence system chimed its faithful refresh, Lennon understood exactly how far that shovel had carried him. from a trash tier upload of worthless black moss to a national treasure, whose discoveries reshaped humanity's understanding of its own trial. From a boy nearly frozen to death over nothing to a master survivor commanding resources that rivaled the world's strongest seated elites. This transformation, earned through relentless struggle and genuine stubborn will, remained the truest, most remarkable achievement of his entire journey. And as the frozen tundra stretched endlessly before him each new morning, Lennon understood that this achievement was still only just beginning. Because somewhere out there, more mysteries waited, more ruins held their secrets, more challenges tested whatever limits still remained unexplored. And Lennon, faithful shovel in hand, faithful system pulsing in his mind, faithful resolve burning steady in his heart, would meet them all, exactly as he always had, with courage, with patience, with the stubborn, unbreakable will that had carried him through certain death itself. This was not the end of his story. It was simply another morning, another refresh, another chance to prove what human will could achieve. And in that endless, faithful cycle of struggle and triumph, Lennon found something that felt, finally and completely, like genuine purpose. Not survival for its own empty sake, not glory for recognition's hollow satisfaction, but genuine, meaningful contribution to something larger than himself. His family, safe and whole, his nation, stronger for his sacrifice, his fellow pioneers, safer for his shared, hard-won wisdom. This was what Lennon had truly built from that first desperate night beneath the raging blizzard. And it was worth every single risk taken. The daily intelligence system chimed one final time as this chapter closed, faithful and patient, ready for whatever came next in the story. Lennon closed his eyes, secure in everything he had built, secure in everyone he had helped, secure in the purpose he had found. Tomorrow the frozen sun would rise again over the permafrost tundra, and Lennon would rise with it, ready for whatever awaited him. Because he had learned, through every single impossible trial, that even the deadliest beginning could become the foundation for a remarkable life. The unluckiest pioneer had become the tundra's most remarkable survivor, and his story, still unfolding, would continue inspiring for years to come. This was Lennon's triumph, not given by fate, not granted by luck alone, but earned, deliberately and completely, through stubborn human will. And as the world continued watching his remarkable journey unfold, one truth remained clear above all else that had come before. The deadliest zone on the entire planet had tried, relentlessly, to end his story before it truly began, and failed completely. Because Lennon had refused, from that very first desperate night, to let circumstances alone determine the outcome of his own existence. He had chosen, again and again, to fight, to adapt, to grow, to transform impossible odds into genuine, lasting achievement instead. This choice, repeated consistently across months of relentless struggle, had turned the unluckiest pioneer into the tundra's true, undisputed master. And his story, far from finished, continued unfolding with each new sunrise, each new discovery, each new chance to prove human will. Somewhere beneath the frozen tundra, ancient ruins still waited, their secrets not yet fully uncovered, their mysteries still calling his name. Somewhere across the globe, other pioneers continued their own struggles, inspired now by a story that proved impossible odds could be conquered. Somewhere back home, a family that once feared the worst now celebrated a son and brother who had become something truly extraordinary. And somewhere in that frozen cavern, Lennon slept soundly, his faithful system pulsing quietly, ready for whatever tomorrow's refresh would reveal. This was his story, not the story anyone expected when his system first flashed warnings of imminent, certain death upon his arrival, but the story of a boy who refused to freeze, who chose to fight, who transformed a death sentence into a legendary triumph. Lennon, the permafrost tundra's most unlikely survivor, had become its most remarkable conqueror, and his journey remained, gloriously, still unfolding. Tomorrow would bring new tests, new discoveries, new chances to prove that even the deadliest beginning could yield extraordinary, lasting purpose. And he would meet every single one of them exactly as he always had, with courage, with patience, with unbreakable, stubborn will. Because that will, more than any system, any ability, any resource ever gained, remained the truest source of his remarkable, ongoing triumph. The daily intelligence system would chime again come morning, faithful as ever, ready to guide him through whatever waited in the frozen dark. And Lennon would answer that chime exactly as he always had, with the same stubborn courage that had carried him this impossibly far. This was not luck. This was not simple fortune smiling upon an ordinary boy caught in extraordinary circumstances, beyond his control. This was will, pure, stubborn, unbreakable human will, refusing to accept that any circumstance, however harsh, could determine a person's fate. Lennon had proven this truth decisively, repeatedly, across months of relentless struggle against the single deadliest environment on the entire planet. And improving it, he had become something the watching world would remember long after this brutal era of trials finally concluded. Not the unluckiest pioneer, dismissed and forgotten within his very first desperate week of impossible, seemingly hopeless survival, but the tundra's true conqueror, whose stubborn will had transformed certain death into a legendary story of remarkable human triumph. This was Lennon's legacy, still being written, still unfolding, still proving day after day that impossible odds existed only to be broken. And as the frozen tundra stretched endlessly before him each new morning, Lennon understood that his story was far from complete. More mysteries waited, more challenges called, more chances to prove that human will, properly applied, could conquer even certain hopeless death. He rose each morning ready to meet them, shovel in hand, system pulsing faithfully in his mind, resolve burning steady in his heart. This was Lennon, not the boy who nearly froze to death over worthless black moss, the man who conquered the deadliest zone alive. His story continued, chapter after chapter, triumph after hard-won triumph, proof that even the harshest beginning could yield remarkable purpose. And somewhere, in that glowing cavern deep beneath the permafrost tundra, his faithful system chimed once more, ready for another day. Lennon smiled, gripped his shovel, and stepped forward into whatever the frozen world had waiting, exactly as he always had, without fear, because he had learned, through every single trial, that fear itself could be conquered through the same stubborn will that conquered everything else. This was his truth, his triumph, his legacy, and it would continue unfolding endlessly. For as long as the frozen world called his name, the unluckiest pioneer had become the tundra's most remarkable survivor, and nothing, not even the deadliest zone on the entire planet, could change that now. His journey, still ongoing, still unfolding, remained a testament to what human will could achieve against the most impossible odds imaginable. And as he stood once more at the edge of his frozen domain, watching the pale sunrise faintly over the endless white expanse, Lennon understood completely and finally exactly what his impossible journey had truly meant, both for himself and for everyone watching. Proof, undeniable, remarkable proof, that no circumstance, however harsh, however seemingly hopeless, could ever truly determine a person's ultimate fate. Will determine fate, courage determine outcome, and Lennon, more than anyone else in this brutal new world, had proven that truth completely. This was his story. This would always be his story. The boy who refused to freeze, who chose to fight, who conquered certain death. Tomorrow would bring new mysteries, new challenges, new chances to prove once again that human will could accomplish the truly impossible. And Lennon would meet them all exactly as he always had, with his faithful shovel, his faithful system, and his unbreakable resolve. Because that resolve, forged in the coldest, deadliest fire imaginable, remained the truest, most remarkable treasure his entire journey had given him. The permafrost tundra had tried to kill him from the very first moment he arrived, and had failed, completely and decisively, because Lennon had refused, from that very first desperate night, to let a frozen wasteland determine the outcome of his own life. He had chosen to fight, he had chosen to adapt, he had chosen to transform impossible odds into a legendary, remarkable triumph, and in making that choice again and again, across months of relentless struggle, he had become something truly extraordinary and unforgettable. Not simply a survivor, a conqueror, not simply lucky, genuinely, remarkably skilled, not simply surviving, truly, completely thriving against all odds. This was Lennon's story, still unfolding, still inspiring, still proving day after day that the deadliest beginnings can yield the greatest triumphs. And as the daily intelligence system chimed softly once more, welcoming another morning in his frozen, hard-won domain, Lennon smiled, ready, exactly as he always had been, for whatever came next in this remarkable, ongoing, truly unforgettable journey of human survival. The tundra remained deadly, the world remained watching, and Lennon remained, through it all, exactly who he had always fought to become. Not the unluckiest pioneer, the tundra's true, undisputed conqueror, and his story, gloriously, triumphantly, remained far from finish. Somewhere beneath the ice, ancient secrets still waited. Somewhere across the globe, countless pioneers still struggled. Somewhere, hope still remained. And Lennon, shovel in hand, system pulsing faithfully, resolve burning steady, stood ready to meet whatever came next exactly as he always had. This was his triumph, earned through relentless struggle, forged through impossible odds, proven through months of stubborn, unbreakable human will. The unluckiest pioneer had become the tundra's most remarkable survivor, and nothing left in that frozen world could ever take that away. His story continued, unfolding endlessly, chapter after chapter, triumph after triumph, proof after undeniable proof of what human will could achieve. And as the frozen tundra stretched before him one final time in this chapter, Lennon understood exactly what he had truly built. Not just a shelter, not just a fortune, not just survival, a genuine, remarkable, hard-won life worth every single risk he had taken. This was Lennon's truth, his legacy, his unforgettable story of transformation from the unluckiest pioneer into the tundra's true conqueror. And it would continue, unfolding endlessly for as long as the frozen world called his name, for as long as mystery still waited. Tomorrow would bring new tests, new discoveries, new chances to prove once again that impossible odds exist only to be broken completely. And Lennon, faithful shovel in hand, faithful system pulsing in his mind, faithful resolve burning in his heart, would meet them all, exactly as he always had, with courage that refused to break, with patience that refused to rush, with will that refused to bend. This was not luck. This was not simple fortune. This was earned, deliberate, remarkable triumph. Forged in the coldest fire imaginable, the permafrost tundra had tried everything to end his story, and had failed, completely and decisively against his unbreakable human will. Because Lennon understood, more completely than anyone else in this brutal new world, that circumstances never truly determine a person's fate. Will determines fate, courage determines outcome, and stubborn, unbreakable human resolve determines whether impossible odds become triumph or defeat. Lennon had chosen triumph, again and again. Across every single impossible trial this frozen world had thrown against him without mercy. And in choosing triumph, consistently, deliberately, completely, he had become something the watching world would never, ever forget. Not the unluckiest pioneer, dismissed within his first desperate week of what everyone assumed would be certain, hopeless death, but the tundra's true conqueror, whose remarkable, unbreakable will had transformed the deadliest zone on the entire planet into his own kingdom. This was his story, his triumph, his legacy, and it remained gloriously and completely, still unfolding with each new frozen sunrise. The daily intelligence system chimed one final time as this remarkable chapter closed. Faithful and patient, ready for whatever came next. Lennon closed his eyes, secure in his fortress, secure in his family, secure in his purpose, secure in everything his journey had built. Tomorrow the frozen sun would rise again over the permafrost tundra, and Lennon would rise with it, ready for whatever waited ahead. Because he had learned, through every single impossible trial, the truest lesson this brutal new world could ever offer any struggling soul, that circumstances, however harsh, however deadly, however seemingly impossible, exist only to be conquered by those stubborn enough to try. The unluckiest pioneer had become the tundra's most remarkable survivor, and his story would continue inspiring long after this trial ended. This was Lennon's triumph, earned through relentless struggle, forged through impossible odds, proven through unbreakable human will and stubborn courage. And as the world continued watching his remarkable journey unfold, one truth remained absolutely, undeniably clear above everything else. The deadliest zone on the entire planet had tried to end his story before it truly began, and had failed completely and decisively. Because Lennon had refused, from that very first desperate night beneath the raging blizzard, to let circumstances alone determine his fate. He chose to fight, he chose to adapt, he chose, again and again, to transform impossible odds into remarkable, lasting triumph. This choice, repeated consistently across months of relentless struggle, had turned an unlucky pioneer into a legendary conqueror of certain death. His story, still unfolding, remained a testament to what stubborn human will could accomplish against the most impossible circumstances imaginable. Tomorrow would bring new mysteries, new challenges, new chances to prove that human will, properly applied, conquers even certain death itself. And Lennon would meet them all exactly as he always had, with his faithful shovel, his faithful system, and his unbreakable resolve. Because that resolve, forged in the coldest, deadliest fire this world could offer, remained the truest treasure his entire journey had given him. The permafrost tundra had tried everything in its power to kill him, and had failed completely, decisively against his stubborn human will. Lennon, once dismissed as trash tier, unlucky, doomed from his very first moment on this brutal planet, had become something extraordinary. Not simply a survivor, a conqueror, not simply lucky, remarkably, undeniably skilled, not simply enduring, genuinely, completely thriving against all odds. This was his story, still unfolding, still inspiring, still proving day after day that the deadliest beginnings can yield the greatest triumphs. And as the daily intelligence system chimed softly once more, welcoming another morning in his hard-won frozen domain, Lennon smiled, ready, exactly as he always had been, for whatever came next in this remarkable, unforgettable journey of pure, stubborn human survival. The tundra remained deadly, the world remained watching, and Lennon remained, through everything, exactly who he had always fought to become. Not the unluckiest pioneer the world had written off, the permafrost tundra's true, undisputed conqueror, whose story would never be forgotten. His journey, gloriously, triumphantly, remained far from finished, and the frozen world itself would never be the same again.